Hello and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, with your boy, your favorite conservatarian contrarian, Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over personalities. And I've got another great conversation for you. This one's a really good friend of mine, known him for a few years now. We've done podcasts together. We've had lots of conversations, and you're really going to love this guy's wisdom. He's going to drop a lot of knowledge, and every time I talk to him, I learn something, especially when it comes to the Constitution. But before I get into all that, you know what to do. You got to like this video. You got to share this video. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. If you want to support my work, the links are in the show notes below. I've got the CashApp, the Venmo app, and the Appity App apps. Every little bit helps me bring you this content. Also, remember that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, original articles, analysis, videos, podcasts, LN Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative Five, all on LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback. Now, without further ado, I want to bring on my homie, Mr. Roderick Threats, the executive director of Black Media Patriot Group, or Black Patriot Media, I messed that up, and the host of the Southern Liberty podcast, Mr. Roderick Threats. How you doing, brother?
Hey, you know it is blessed morning down here in good old South Florida, so you know how that goes down.
Yeah, good.
Indeed.
Now you just moved back recently from Utah. Now I've been meaning to ask you this. I'll just ask you right now. Now, why'd you? Because you lived in Utah for a long time. You were very deeply involved in the local politics there. Mm-hmm. But I know you're originally from Florida, so did you just want to go back home, or what brought you back?
It was the homesickness. You know what I mean? I left Florida at 17, right? Went to college, etc. And then, I was working on the boats, working overseas, what have you. And then when I bounced back to the States, I ended up in Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and then eventually Utah at that point. And then, I hadn't been home, right? I hadn't been home since I'd been back on American soil at that point. So, it's about time to go home, right? My mother's getting older, stepfather's getting older, kind of deal, right? So it was like, okay, I need to go home, take care of mom. And that just kind of started the chain reaction of decisions. And here I am back in Florida. So,
wow. That makes sense. I'm originally from Southern California, although I'm probably not going to go back. But
I don't blame you.
Visit. But
I don't blame you.
Yeah, went to Texas, and now I'm here in Florida. I never thought I would end up in Florida, but it kind of made sense because last year I spent a lot of time here.
Yep, I remember. I was here
5 times last year.
I remember.
Yeah. So before we get into all the political stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about Black Patriot Media Group and your podcast and what you've been doing?
Well, Black Patriot Media Group, I founded it about 4 years. 4 years? Yeah, 4 years. Wow, it's been that long. Yeah, 4 years ago, based off of my original podcast called The Rod Threats Show. That's kind of how it all snowballed. And I was doing, news commentary, things like that. And then just a couple of events happened locally in local politics with the Utah GOP. And I was like, wait a minute, wait, we talking about the wrong things at this point, right? So I kind of shifted to pushing out a conservative / civil libertarian type message, and changed the name of the podcast to Conservative Enclave, all that good stuff. And then things just evolved. I picked up a couple new co-hosts. One of them is a degreed psychologist, where we talk about the psychology in politics and how psychology is used to manipulate the masses in whatever, particular directions for the narrative. And obviously legislation, that's one of my key points is, reading legislation, understanding legislation passed on the federal level. So that show came into an existence. And then later on, it was me, you, and James Chief on Sundays doing a Black roundtable kind of deal, speaking, from a, Black perspective in politics, etc. And it's just taking off. Now I'm at the point where I am on a particular site called Listen Notes, right? I'm in the top 4% most listened to podcast in the world, which is awesome, out of 2.9 million podcasts. Yeah, so I'm blessed there. And I'm also broadcasting on a few public radio stations down here in South Florida. So it's blown up to a point where I almost can't handle the whole thing, right?
Wow.
Like it's so much, it consumes so much of my day, where I literally sit here, where you see me sitting right now, usually where I start sitting at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I usually don't get up from this chair until midnight, because then I'm dealing with geopolitical stuff on the back end, talking to my friends overseas and what's going on in the Eastern European countries and Eurasia and Northern Africa. I'm getting that content together for my geopolitical podcast on Sunday. So it's a constant run. It's just, it's a mess, but it's worth it. It's worth it to the masses to have the information that I have, so they can determine what's truth, what's fact, right? So I don't ever claim to be an arbiter of truth. I'm like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing. You go assess it and research it for yourself. That's kind of where I'm at with it. So
yeah, I mean, I can see how that'd be overwhelming, but I guess that's a good problem to have, right? I mean, it's better than, nobody listening to you. And I think people are craving it. I mean, even when I first started listening, before we met, I would listen to your podcast, and I used to like how you used to like just always go a little bit deeper. Right. Not even a little bit deeper. You used to go a lot deeper than what people are used to. Like, you actually read the legislation. I used to listen to you parse it out, and I used to like your thought process too. I mean, especially when it comes to the Constitution. Like, anytime I talk about you, I say this man is a walking Constitution. Like, he has like the whole thing memorized. He can quote you chapter and verse from the Constitution. If you ask him about an issue of the day and how the Constitution relates to it, if it does, he's going to know chapter and verse what it is. So there's a lot of depth of knowledge. So when it comes to the Constitution, I'm either going to ask you about it, or somebody who I know is a constitutional lawyer. Like, you were one of two people who I will trust on when it comes to constitutional matters. How did that even happen? Like, how did you even become so well versed in the Constitution?
It's one of those things, when you take the oath to the piece of paper, you should know what you're defending. You should know what you're upholding. And that's when it started at 17 years old. That's where it started, right? It started with just reading the basic tenets, right? And then it grew. Honestly, I'll show you right here on film. I'm gonna show you where it grew. It grew into a book like this, which basically breaks down pretty much a lot of the doctrines of the Constitution, to a book like this.
Jeez.
Right? I have read this book at least 3 times.
Wow.
This is 1,492 pages. No lie. 1,492 pages.
You can use that as a weapon.
You could, right? But, and that book explains how all the doctrines apply to the amendment, whatever amendment in the Constitution, or Article 2, Article 3. And that's, that knowledge has been fostered. I've been fostering that knowledge for 30 years, right? And there's some things you remember, some things you forget, but then when issues of the day come up, something snaps. Oh yeah, that's that could be this could be that, right? So, and it's always constant, it's always constant knowledge gathering, right? Because case law, right, can change interpretations of the Constitution. Right. And then we have to determine as the people if that is actually a constitutional thing. Is it fallen doctrine? And that's another discussion for another day, because a lot of our case law literally violates the Constitution in so many different ways. It's ridiculous and misinterpretations, right? But that's another day, another time. But that's kind of where it snowballed into, right? So you have to know what you're defending. You have to know what you're upholding and understand that.
That's true. I mean, especially as conservatives, because we always talk about how we value the Constitution, and a lot of us don't really even know much about what it says. Like, I didn't for a while, and I would still love to know more. But even for a while, I didn't really know much about the Constitution and why it's so important. But when it comes to politics, like, how did you get into it? Like, you have a pretty rich history with politics. I think with your family too, being involved in Republican politics. How did that come about for you?
Well, it all started for me back that one switch in 1991, right, when Bob Martinez was governor of the state of Florida.
Okay.
And Bob Martinez had basically said that Two Live Crew could not sell their music in Broward County because it was vulgar and, well, you know, the whole 9 yards. Well, I got a chance to speak. I was randomly picked. And mind you, at this time I was like 14. 14, was I 14? 14 at the time, 14, 15, one of those ages. I can't remember. I'm too old. But
hey, I was 11, so you're not that old.
Okay, old enough then.
Yeah.
And I was at this rally in Tallahassee protesting Bob Martinez. And I asked to speak, you know, what have you, right? And I was like, you know, and I kind of went through on how, you know, Black folks, their language, our language has been controlled or metered, right, through ordinances and laws, etc., especially during Jim Crow, right? We couldn't say certain things, or we'd get caught up in some nonsense that we didn't do, or fake charges, etc. And I was like, this is literally and I had the knowledge from my parents that this is literally the same thing, what they were trying to do to Two Live Crew. Even though you people don't agree with the music and what have you, freedom of speech is freedom of speech. And too many of us Americans have been muzzled long enough, right, to not be able to say what we want and how we say. We need to live by the document that we claim that we love, right? And that was kind of like my first spiel. It's like 40 seconds. And then from there, I got a few people in the Republican Party trying to talk to me, a few people in the Democrat Party trying to talk to me. Because back in that time, we have to keep in mind, too, in Florida, Democrats and Republicans were not at each other's necks, right? I mean, they were, you know what I mean? They were, I won't say interchangeable, but they were agreeable and they could get stuff done. But on this particular issue,
each other. Like they can have, so we could have civil disagreements, and even if it gets heated, you're not calling the other person a Nazi.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So those are the days.
Right. So after that, I went to my first county GOP meeting in Baker County, and they had just started the Young Republicans wing. It had just started like 3 years prior nationwide. Right. Brand new thing. And people nominated me to be the chair of the Baker County Young Republicans. Nice. I was 15 at the time, and that was it. I was the chair until I was 17, until I moved away. But that was kind of like my start. And we got into understanding local ordinances and, you know, understanding, you know, because Baker County is very unusual, right? Because we, in McClenny, right, that's where the Baker County Sheriff's Office is, right? But we had to get people to understand that the sheriff is the most powerful person in the county. It ain't the police chief, right? It's not, you know, anybody else, the sheriff, right? Because he's an Article 3 officer, right? He's a constitutional officer. He's the most powerful person in the county. So if anybody's doing anything unconstitutional and it's egregious, he is the one to arrest them, right? Etc. So that's kind of where the civics started. The politics started, understanding, you know, the separation of powers, etc. And then that was it. It was off in the wind. I was doing all kinds of different political stuff and getting involved with constitutional activities, constitutional lawsuits, things like that. So
you were especially in Utah, you were very much involved with the GOP there. Now that you're back in Florida, have you gotten involved where you are yet, or?
I'm squeezing my way in, but honestly, you want to hear something really, I shouldn't say crazy, but crazy, is that I'm working with Democrats down here.
Oh, really?
I'm working with Democrats down here, right? I go over across the river over to Riviera Beach, right, which is a predominantly Black suburb of Miami-Dade Metro.
Okay.
And except for a couple folks on the city council, they're all Black folk, all Democrat, right? And it's amazing how a different perspective sometimes that comes into play. That, I never looked into that, right? So I'm working with the mayor of Riviera Beach, right, to reduce the cost for business licenses again.
Okay.
Right. So folks can start businesses out of their homes, right? Especially with the COVID, things like that. That would be a big relief, to the community. right? And I'm out here in the streets in the community bringing solutions, right, to them, helping the community, with the food drives and trash pickup and just things like that. And it's all Democrats. And they don't care that I have affiliated with Republican or conservative or libertarianish, right? They're like, oh, thanks for the help. And it's different, right? That's
so,
what I
so
keep
they don't
saying.
kick you out because you voted
No.
Trump or because you vote Republican.
No,
Really?
not at all.
I was
Because
told that if you're black and you go to a black area and you're a Republican, they'll beat you up and kick you out.
but it's all about presentation though, right? It's about how you're going about it. I didn't say anything about my political affiliation. Only people that knew was the mayor and a couple city council members, but they didn't care. Right? They're like, okay, I'm glad to work with people, because the thing is with the local level, what people don't understand, and you understand it, but a lot of folks at large don't understand, is like when you get to the local level, Democrat, Republican don't matter. It does not. The affiliation does not matter. The local politics is way different than the national politics, right? And that's where people have to understand. People on the local level don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. Are you going to do the work?
Right.
Are you willing to come out to do the work? If you're
you
not, then you're going to be ostracized by these people. And that's kind of how I was met, because I kind of had the same thing as, okay, they're going to think I'm just some weirdo right-wing nut job, whatever, what have you. And I'm like, no, I said, I got solutions just like you guys. Maybe we can combine ideas, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've done, right? I mean, I'm even starting in June. I'm helping to start a community committee over in Riviera Beach that the mayor will come to, right, once every 2 weeks to explain. But it'll be like a state of the city address kind of deal, and he'll come out and come talk to the community and say, hey, this is what's going on. He's not gonna be here like 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes kind of deal, right? But we want to get all the community involved from all the districts, right, and be able to hear what's going on and voice their opinions to the mayor. Because I mean, the mayor does do that, but then the people don't get together, right? So that's kind of the purpose, having all the people come together from all their districts, have like kind of like a community council kind of deal, and then that way people can go to City Hall, to the city council meetings to address the issue, or they can talk to their representative. They say, hey, you need to come out to this, to our little meeting so we can explain to you what's going on. So we're starting that in June. Hopefully it kicks off like all get out, and then hopefully we can spread it across Palm Beach County. Palm Beach County is pretty big, but hopefully we can spread it across Palm Beach County and be able to hold these local officials accountable, for their actions. So.
Yeah, and that's what it should look like. I mean, that's what community involvement should look like, and we need more of that. I mean, we get so caught up in what's going on in the White House or at the Capitol, and that stuff is important, but it's at the local level that is the most important.
Yes.
So yeah, like me personally, like I do want to get involved in local politics here. Not running for office. I mean, just like getting involved in volunteering.
Jacksonville's hard. The Ville is hard. It's hard nut to crack. Duval's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. I got my sources. I got one source, but
easy. I got one source. Yeah, it's hard to crack, but once you get in, it's like you're sailing at that point. But anyway, we can talk about that offline.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we definitely will. So I want to, going back to the Constitution and even kind of talking about how things used to be. There's this tweet that I saw, and I just thought of it while you were talking, so I pulled it up.
Okay.
And I want to get your reaction to it, because I don't really know what to make of this. Like, I've been chewing on it a little bit, and I think it's very interesting, and I can see why he's saying this, but I just don't know. So I'm going to read it to you. It's Jesse Kelly. I don't know if you're familiar with Jesse Kelly.
I know Jesse. Yep.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I've been on the show a few times. But he said, this was last week. He said, y'all do understand the Constitution is null and void, right? You get that? He says, quote, a constitution is just a contract. Once one side has decided to break the contract, it just becomes a useless piece of paper. You're abiding by terms dismissed by the enemy. And so, I retweeted that and asked my followers what they thought. And to be fair, he's not saying that he likes this or that he wants it to be this way, but it sounds like he's just really lost faith in the idea that the Constitution is even still relevant, because he sees his perception is that the other side has violated it so much and basically shredded it that it no longer means anything. Like, what do you think of that?
You know what? For the context of this conversation, I would have to agree with Jesse Kelly, right? But this breach of contract happened back in 1918 with the ratification of the 17th Amendment, right? When the United States government coerced the states to release their power in the federal government, they broke the contract, right?
You mean as far as who's elected to the Senate?
Right, that's correct. Because we have to remember, the Senate was supposed to be represented by the states, right? And who the state legislatures appoint, right? Because the 50 states create the union, and we, the people, are of the 50 states.
Yes.
We're not of the United States. We, the people of the 50 states, because we are citizens, not only we're citizens of our states, not citizens of the country. We're citizens of our states, right? So once they ratified the 17th Amendment, it threw all the power of the people, the power of the states, out the window with the baby in the bathwater. That's when the contract was broken. Because see, now the people elect the senators, right? The people elect the senators. Where's the state representation in that when the people already have one chamber of commerce that's called the House?
Yeah, that was supposed to be ours. Yeah.
Right. So now we can't own both. Where's the state's representation? And then you look what the federal government has done. They quid pro quo the states all the time. If there's something they can't handle, what do? They pass it down to the states and have the people thinking that, oh, yeah, that we should do that. Look at Medicaid expansion. Medicaid's gotten too big for the federal government. So what do? They kick it down to the states to expand Medicare. Not their responsibility. Now the state is stuck in a political battle because, like, the state said, we didn't ask for this problem. We didn't sign up for this problem. You took away our power to vote against Medicare, right? They took away their power with the 17th Amendment because a lot of states wouldn't have let it ride because that is not their responsibility, right? So now we're looking at a state that is in a political battle, that is in a basically forever turning election battle because people say, we want the Medicare expansion here because the federal government told them so, right?
Yeah.
And then now these state senators and state house reps are their positions are threatened because of a unforeseen circumstance they had no control over.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this, so before the 17th Amendment, the state, I mean, obviously, we know the state would select senators. So, like, let's say it's Florida. Florida's legislature or government would select 2 senators to send to Washington. These senators were accountable to the state government, not necessarily to the people directly, because we're not voting for them, at least not directly. I mean, we're voting for the people who put them in office, but still. Right. But when they did the 17th Amendment, now we elect senators directly, and the people and the cronies in D.C. can basically use these senators to come back to their states and say to the people, hey, vote for me, or hey, we need this Medicare expansion, or we need this policy, because whatever. They're more accountable to us when we may not necessarily be privy to all the information as to how that will affect the state, whereas the state government is. Right. Not that that's perfect either. There is no perfect system, but still, but there's a difference between being accountable to the state and then being accountable to the voters, right? Right.
That's correct. That's right.
It changes the dynamic.
That's exactly correct. And then to add insult to injury, right after the 17th Amendment was ratified 11 years later, they passed a Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929. What that did was limit the number of representatives in the House. That's why we see it only stuck at 435 today, plus the 4 delegates, right? So not only do we have no representation from the states in the Senate, true representation per the Sherman Compromise, we also don't have true representation of the people in the House because it's been capped at 435 people. Now, some people will dissent and say, well, we don't need all those people. I said, first of all, why do you need a full-time legislature in the federal government? That was not the intent. There was supposed to be a part-time legislature, right? They're supposed to be part-time, and these people are supposed to go back down to the states and work as they're supposed to. If there's a vote that comes up, guess what? The Speaker of the House can convene the House. The President of the Senate, aka the Vice President, or the President pro tem could convene the Senate, right, to vote on pressing matters. Or if extreme circumstances come out, the President, right, can use the convening of Congress clause to bring both chambers back.
Okay.
If he wanted to, right? That was the framework of the Constitution, based on the Sherman Compromise. That's how it's supposed to be. The bicameral, states in the Senate, people in the House. But they've destroyed all the representation. They represent all the people. They don't represent the states, and all the people are not represented. Right? And again, like I was saying, people will say that there'll be way too many representatives, right? But I'm like,
yeah, I mean, that'd be my concern. I mean, how many are we going to have?
It would be last I counted, and now I'm gonna add a caveat too. That's with us ratifying Article the 1st, which changes the representation clause in the Constitution from 1 in 30,000 to 1 in 60,000. Right?
Okay.
We're looking at pretty close to 10,000 representatives.
Woo!
But we look at it this way, right? How many mayors do we have?
True.
Right?
True.
And we've proven that we can convene Congress in Zoom meetings.
That's true.
Why do you got to be in D.C. when you could be down here with the people working to actually find the solutions, right? To actually talk to the people and find out what's going on, instead of being stuck in that stuffy 68 square mile space up there with your suit all tucked up. It's like, I'm a representative of Texas. I don't have to go down to Texas anymore. No, fool, you got to go down to Texas, talk to your people.
You know when you're saying that, that number sounds high, but then I'm also thinking that would also dilute the amount of the amount of importance that we place on the federal government too, because if you have that many, then you have fewer people who are superstars, right? Like, we love especially on the right, we like our celebrity lawmakers. Mm-hmm. But if there's 1,000 of them, or however many there are, you're going to have less of that, because it's going to be harder for people to stand out. So on one end, I can see how that might be beneficial, because the focus now is more on let me do the work for my constituents here in my state. And maybe the legislature is a part-time thing, which I didn't realize that it was supposed to be that. But but that would actually probably work better to bring it more back to that. So that number sounds shocking at first, but I think when you actually think about it, it might be a better way to take some of the focus off of the federal government and put it where it belongs, at the state and local level. Right.
That's exactly right. Because if that representative, right, is as accessible as your mayor is, right, then you can actually hold them directly accountable, right? Because if we look at now, right, the average representation the average representation ratio, right, representative to citizen ratio is 1 in almost 950,000. Think about that a minute. 950,000.
Wow. Huh.
How do you represent 1 million people? Right?
Yeah.
And I put this in contrast, right? Salt Lake County, Utah, has 1.47 million people. Salt Lake County also has 2 at-large seats for county council. Let's put that in perspective a minute. County council at-large seat represents 1.4 million people.
I mean, there would be no way to be accessible to your community if you've got that many people. It's impossible.
No, it's impossible. That's why that has to change. I mean, I would even go for 1 in 100,000. I would even go for that, right? 60,000. I mean, considering 10,000 reps, I could see that. But 1 in 100,000, considering majority of your top 25, top 50 cities have a population of at least 100,000. I could see that. One representative basically covering a city.
Right.
I could see that, right? But who's going to come to terms with that? Because people are so used to wanting control of the federal government, which we're not supposed to have control of in the first place. But anyway, so they can push their agenda. That's why so many of these crappy bills have gotten passed, because the people influencing senators in the House, and it's not supposed to be like that. The question is, at the end of the day, right, the states get screwed, because the states end up having to fork out money that they may not have for some program that you advocated for on a federal level. Now that the state's got to tax you, now you're going to complain about being taxed. And I'm like, see, if you let the states determine what was going on, right? If it was in their budget, they could have voted against it and safeguarded you against these taxes. You've gave the state no choice but to raise taxes to pay for the program you advocated for on a federal level. You can't be mad. You asked for it. Where do you think the money's coming from?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when the senators are elected by the people, the senators, it's easier, especially in 2022, it's easier to persuade people who don't really know much about what's going on why they might need something than it would be to persuade the state government to say, hey, I need to go vote for this. And the state be like, no, we know what's going on in our state. That's not going to work for us. You're not going to do that, or else we'll can you. But when it's the people may not know better, because most people don't have the time to research this stuff, right?
No.
And you know, they're not teaching civics like they used to in class. We don't know what we don't know. So it is interesting how that plays out.
Right.
And when you don't understand that, you just think that, you know, I don't know, it's like we have this view of government that is not accurate, because we just don't know the facts and we don't understand the history behind how things came to be the way they are. It was just a few years ago that I learned that at one point states elected the senators and not the people.
Right.
So but I bet there's still plenty of Americans who don't know that.
Yeah, because you're right. They have not been taught differently, right? When it comes to that. And what people also must understand is the Constitution, right, does not give you your rights. And that's another misconception. Right. They don't give you rights. It tells the government what they cannot infringe upon. It keeps them in line. Right.
Yeah.
With that being said, I got to go there a minute. KBJ, I got to go there a minute.
Oh.
That hearing was one of the worst hearings for a Supreme Court justice outside of Kavanaugh. That was the worst, because guess what? I'm sitting there. I watched every hour of it. Literally, I was glued to that monitor over there on that wall while I was in here listening. It was the worst questioning from both sides. One side's worried about child prawn people, right? And the sentencing of child prawn people. And the other side's worried about, she's defeats black women. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, what's her constitutional doctrine?
We've gotten away from that. I've been talking to some of my colleagues about this. It's like, and I hate to say it, but it's like, you know, we talk about, is this candidate qualified? Is she qualified? What that used to mean is, you know, what, like you said, what is their constitutional doctrine? What has their experience been? How long have they been a judge? You know, have they, you know, what kind of rulings have they given? That kind of thing. That used to be determine whether or not you were qualified. But now it's moved more towards political, or the politics of it. And it didn't start here. I mean, this has been going on for a while now. But it's just interesting how it's kind of switched from that. Now, even this has become even more politicized, when it's really supposed to be about, can you do the job or not, whether I agree with your rulings or not.
Right. And that's my whole thing, right? And I was talking to a few Republicans here in South Florida, and they're like, well, she's going to be, if she's going to rule like that, then how's she going to be a good judge? I said, two things. One, the Supreme Court does not adjudicate criminal cases. That's out the window. You're done deal. That's it. You've already failed the test. You failed the assignment right there. Because you forgot the job of the Supreme Court of the United States. They are to determine constitutionality, nothing else. Now, the other piece with that, and this is what I go at Republicans about all the time. I was like, if Republicans were really genuine about their question to her about the child prawn thing, right? And I said it like that so it doesn't get your John banned, right? They should have asked her, what is her opinion, right, of the proportionality doctrine of the Eighth Amendment? And that would have told them everything they would have needed to know about that whole thing, right? And
now what does that mean, the proportionality?
Okay, the proportionality doctrine comes out of the Eighth Amendment, right? The Eighth Amendment talks about excessive bail, right? It's excessive bail. So does the bail fit the crime? Does the time fit the crime, right? And there's certain levels that goes with that, right? Now, the other piece with that too, that kind of turned me off on her was the fact that she was like, well, Congress, well, they dictate the sentencing guidelines. And I'm like,
that one kind of, okay, I want to hear what you have to say, because that kind of made me raise a few eyebrows too.
Okay, see, let's put this in, let me just put this on her resume on Front Street. She was the vice chair of the United States Sentencing Commission, appointed by Barack Obama. She was on the United States Sentencing Commission for 3 years.
Okay.
The United States Sentencing Commission is an independent agency under Article 3 to determine if proportionality, according to the crime, is correct. Do we need to up the sentencing or lower it? Now, let's go back to her question or her answer. Congress determines the sentencing guidelines.
Yeah. See, I mean, it felt like she was just trying to deflect it off on Congress, which, I mean, yeah, we can say that Congress should have also fixed that too. Fine, whatever. But to me, it's like when I'm thinking guidelines, and I even asked a friend about this, who's a lawyer who I brought up earlier, you know, they're guidelines. So a judge can still sentence the way they want to sentence, unless it's law that you have to follow these guidelines.
Right.
Then they can kind of sentence within whatever the law says in their state or with the federal government.
Right.
So, I mean, so if she was sentencing some at lower, some at about guidelines or whatever, that was her choice.
Right.
That's the impression that I got. That's how I understand it. So I don't know if I'm right or wrong about it. But I know that, I mean, but even with that issue, she's not the only one who did that. I'm sure that there may have even been conservative judges who made
they said that. They brought, actually CNN wrote a piece about that, how there's conservative judges that did not, you know, that didn't follow the doctrine, kind of went the same right KBJ did. And I'm like, see, like,
and what bugs me about it is that now that she's appointed, we don't care about this stuff anymore. That brought to light a problem. Maybe the guidelines are not strong enough for people who do child prawn, right? Maybe that could have been an issue that could have catapulted off this, and we could have said, you know what? We need to hold our Congress accountable. We need to hold the Sentencing Commission accountable and all that stuff. And that could have led to some actual change. But no, since we're so focused on the politics of it, and because we don't like her, then that's the only reason it was ever relevant in the first place, because it was a tool that we could use to attack her.
Right. And the other thing we got to bring up too, right, that conservatives keep bringing up, she can't identify a woman.
You saw me going in on that. I thought that was hilarious. I understood what she was doing, so I didn't, I wasn't criticizing. I did think it was funny.
But you know what? If she would have came with a constitutional answer, I would have been like, because there is a constitutional answer for it.
Okay.
Right? The Constitution does not define gender.
That's true.
Think about that, right? Persons. They define persons. Now, if we look in Johnson's dictionary of 1789, what the word person means, it means an individual or a distinguished individual or man or an individual man or woman. That's what person means. So people have to look at it in the context where the Constitution was written. You can't change definitions of words.
Oh, wait, were the people who wrote the Constitution biologists? Or I couldn't help myself.
That's what I'm saying, though, right? And seriously, that's the problem with the Constitution, because people don't read it to understand it in the context it was written. They'd rather change the definitions of words to fit what they want. And that goes down to the whole transgender thing. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care if you're bi. The Constitution says all persons shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property. You are a person. Sorry, game over. Your narrative is done, but people want to keep buying into it. And that's why I tell conservatives, leave that transgender stuff alone. Leave it alone. It doesn't matter, because if you know the Constitution, at the end of the day, the Constitution still protects them. You might not like the decisions they've made in their lives to be trans or whatever. They're still a person. You respect them as a person because the Constitution respects them as a person, to not deprive them of their rights.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just felt like a circus. And to be honest, I didn't watch any of it because I just figure I'll look at the highlights, and I wasn't planning on writing much about it. So I was like, she's going to get appointed. I look at her history. I mean, she's qualified as far as, having the requisite experience and all of that stuff. So I'm like, she's going to get appointed, so I can't, I feel like I'm wasting my time if I'm taking this too seriously.
Right.
So that's why I just made jokes about it the whole time. But I also didn't take it seriously because the aspects that we should be taking seriously, I knew that we weren't. When that whole debate over the those cases came up, I'm like, and I found out that a lot of judges do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, so this could be an opportunity to fix it.
Yeah, it sure could.
And it was frustrating. So I'm like, well, screw it. I hope we wake up sometime. But like, if we actually care about child porn the way we say we do, we should have been leading the charge on this, and we didn't.
Right. That's exactly right. And again, right, going back to the proportionality doctrine of the Eighth Amendment, right? Understanding if we feel that the time doesn't fit the crime, we should be changing it.
Exactly.
We should be advocating to change that. We shouldn't be arguing over she gave lesser sentences. Wait a minute. Skirt, we need to talk to someone at the United States Sentencing Commission, right? And they have open hearings, even though they're in DC. Right now they're doing them on Zoom meetings. I was actually on one a couple weeks ago, listening to what they're dealing with, right? But they're public forums. You can speak or at these public forums of the United States Sentencing Commission. That's what we should be doing instead of arguing in the streets about KBJ talking giving out lesser sentences. Like, no, we can stop that, because at the end of the day, judges are appointed, right? So we can hold not only the president accountable, we can also hold the United States Sentencing Commission accountable for the lessening of the sentences. But we don't want to do that. We just want to attack the character of a person because they decided to take a different stance of jurisprudence on a particular issue.
Yeah, we like the sound bites, we like the owning the libs, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But so I wanted to, before we get done, I wanted to talk about some of the news of the day. We talked about a lot of stuff. And I figured we would, because that's what we do. But
that's right.
But what's your take on this whole Elon Musk thing, bro? With Twitter?
You know what? I'm sitting here watching Elon eat these people up, bro. Like, I'm just like, man, the entire progressive left and some of the progressive right too are losing their minds right now. Oh my God, we can't spew our propaganda anymore because Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist. I'm like, okay, bro. Y'all are the same, and they're talking about we're gonna leave Twitter. We're gonna leave Twitter if Elon takes on. I'm like, you know what? You the same people that said you would leave America if Trump was elected president. Sit your behind down somewhere like you got some sense and keep typing on Twitter like you've been. Like, don't virtue signal me. You know what I'm saying? Like, why are you playing? You ain't going nowhere. You're just gonna sit here and dog Elon Musk because people are gonna see that they've been lied to about a lot of this stuff on here. They will find out that Twitter's been censoring a lot of stuff, right, on there, right? And this goes for both sides. Right? The left believes that they're virtuous in the information they have, and it's altruistic, and the right keeps dismissing some of the information from the left. They will both understand that they have both been lied to for the greater narrative, right? While the right keeps getting dismissed off of social media platforms like Twitter for putting out alternative truth from different sources,
Right.
the left will still play their truth is altruistic. Right?
So I'm predicting that because of this, that Democrats are going to try to pass legislation on social media, whether that deals with Section 230 or other stuff. They've already been talking about it, but up until this point, it's all been talk. They haven't actually pushed anything. I think that because of this, they're going to actually try to pass something. I'm not saying they'll succeed, and I'm not saying it'll happen tomorrow, but there's a reason why they're talking about it now, and that. And I'm predicting that they're actually going to try to push some legislation. What do you think? How do you think that could play out, or what do you think they'll try to do?
They'll try to strike out 230. They will literally try to pass legislation that will strike out 230. Because we know historically Democrats like to go to extremes.
Yeah.
When there's something they don't like in legislation, we know this, right? And any Democrats that are going to be watching this, you have to come to that realization that's what Democrats do. They will go complete. So they will abolish 230 in spite of their face, because Elon Musk will have control of the biggest and most notorious social media platform in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess next to Facebook, but because that will affect Facebook too. And we've already been seeing, the Biden administration trying to pressure Facebook to censor more because of COVID. And they've used COVID as the pretext, but they'll, even though we're in the post-COVID era, I think COVID still provides a good excuse for them to do this, and they'll come up with other excuses. And basically their goal is to get these social media companies to censor more and to censor specifically the stuff that they don't like.
Right.
What do you think that Republicans should do? I mean, should our lawmakers try to do their own type of regulation to make sure that the Democrats don't get their way, or how should they respond to what the Democrats are about to do?
The only true response, I would think, against them trying to rip out 230, that can, well, you got me thinking now. That would be more on the lines of, you know what? That'd be brilliant. Make the internet a public utility.
That's kind of where I'm hoping it goes.
Make the internet a public utility. And that way, government cannot have that much control over what streams through any of that or anything attached to it. They're absolving at that point.
Now, you're saying the entire internet, or just social media?
I would make the whole internet. Make the whole internet a public utility. That way, they do not have control, because we have to look at it this way, right? We have countries that shut down the internet when there's an uprising, etc., because they have control. You make the internet a public utility, government no longer has any control over any of it.
Yeah. I think I could get on board with that, actually.
I'm just saying. I mean, there'll be some details to work out, right? Because of antitrust laws and things like that, and the SEC, things like that. But I'm just saying, making internet a public utility would be a start to take government control. Because, I mean, look at what they did with TikTok, right? They had those influencers on TikTok going on to spread the correct message about COVID.
That's right. That's right. And what's interesting, and the counter argument from the left would be, well, what if somebody goes on Facebook and, issues a death threat or whatever? And to me, it's like if they issue a death threat, or if they try to incite violence, stuff that's already illegal, right? They should be held accountable. But I'm like, well, if I pick up my phone and I call somebody and I say, I'm going to kill you, I broke the law. I'm issuing a threat. But that doesn't mean that my cell phone company should be held accountable for that.
Right.
They can't do anything about it.
Nope.
And even if it was a public utility, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these companies would still try to suppress death threats and incitements to violence because they don't want the lawsuits that could come with that.
Right.
But still, I could see that. To me, Keisha and I were actually talking about this last night. I think it does make sense to have it be more of a public utility.
Yeah.
That solves a lot of the problem.
Yeah, it will 100% and take government control out of it completely. Right. The only problem you'll have with that, though, once you make the internet a public utility, the municipalities in the United States can take it on as a utility and a charging utility.
What do you mean?
Well, think about cities. Some cities have their own electric company.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The internet can be rationed the same way in your municipality, right? So you would have to, again, right, put in provisions in federal law that cannot happen.
Yeah.
Right.
They do it.
Oh yeah, real quick. Oh, we don't want no Republican content. We don't want no Democrat.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Right. So you could do that. Right, and they would have to put in, in that provision that would you could even codify it into Section 230 of the FCC of 37. Right, you could codify it into that to say, even though it is a public utility, it cannot be parsed out. Right.
Yeah.
But then the other piece of that would be, how do we separate the three majors in internet? How do we get their grasp legally off of that to control that? Because once you make it a public utility, now it's at the whim of the company, right? Xfinity, Time Warner, and Spectrum are the three biggest internet companies in the country. So how do you take their grasp off of that to make sure it's a true public utility?
Yeah, that'd be a lot of stuff to work out. I mean, I'm sure it can be done. But
it can be done, certainly. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it can be done.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Disney? I got to go there. Disney? Okay. I'll go there a minute. I was that dude back in the 90s saying Disney should not have such a status.
See, why doesn't that surprise me? That doesn't surprise me at all. That does not surprise me at all that you were saying that before it ever became an issue. Like my thing is, like, I found out about that maybe like 5-6 years ago. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe it made sense then. I don't know, but do they really need to have that? I mean, I wasn't in this business then, but
right.
But yeah, I agree, and I'm not surprised that you were already calling for that.
I'm just saying, when you have a corporation working as a foreign entity on United States soil and they're not subjected to U.S. law, that's a problem. That's an autonomous zone, literally.
It is. Sonny and I were just talking about that. There's no difference between Disney and Chaz.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
hello, right? I mean, even to the point where, right, and hopefully you'll get down there one day, right? But you got Bay City, you got Lake Buena Vista, right, which are Disney. They have their own city councils, they own mayors, and they still petition. Up until the passing of that bill, they could still petition the state government for money for building projects in those two cities.
Wow.
So, how many people think, how many people think that was actually okay? Right? I mean, think about how many people thought that was actually okay. And still today, it's like, well, no, you can't mess with Disney. I'm like, dude, it was, if Disney was to, seriously, right? We think about jurisdiction here, right? This is kind of extreme, but think about this a minute. If Disney was to militarize and launch a strike against the city of Orlando, Disney would be an enemy combatant. They would be they would be a foreign adversary because they're operating outside of U.S. law. They're operating outside of U.S. jurisdiction. Sorry, they would be an enemy combatant.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse would be out the streets with an AK.
AR, AK, javelins.
You got to be driving a tank.
You wrong for that, bro. You wrong for that. Daffy Duck on top.
See, but here's my thing with the whole thing. I don't disagree with what they did. As far as shipping him up that status, it was the motivation that concerns me. Like that's the thing. Like it was very clearly done because they engaged in free speech that they didn't like, and they're punishing them. So that's where I'm like, okay, I don't. It's one of those things to where do I think that this is going to be sort of a trend on the right where we embrace more statism? I'm not convinced of that yet. But when people were celebrating this, I wanted to be the one to say, okay, you can celebrate this, but just remember the motivation was wrong. This is stuff that we are usually against. And I get that, I'm a principled guy. I get that none of us live up to our principles 100% all the time. Nobody does. So to me, it's a situation where it's like if conservatives will support this, but, they're not going to go further than that, then I still don't like it. But, okay, I'll stomach it. But I am going to at least say, hey, just be cognizant of what we're doing here because we don't want this to go further. That was my only concern. I mean, as far as, I don't care about Disney. I mean, I like seeing them get slapped around, but I think that was a long time coming because like you said, this should have been an issue before. They should have been talking about this before. And Disney has enjoyed its special privilege. And honestly, I think it's not going to matter because they're going to renegotiate and they'll probably still have something close to what they had before. Or do you think that'll happen? Or do you think that
I think they will renegotiate, and I think they will be paying taxes to Orange and Polk County at the end of the whole thing. That's what I think personally.
Okay.
Because they already have an infrastructure that's been there since 1967. They got a full infrastructure like police, judge, jail, shop, like the whole thing. How do you turn that over? To a municipal entity to control, right? Because now you got to retrain police officers. You got to, you know what I mean? There's a whole lot of stuff that has to happen, big undertaking, right? So I do see Disney come back to the table and say, you know what, my bad, bro. Maybe I shouldn't have weighed in on that, bro. But let's talk about this, fam. You know what I'm saying?
I was playing. Those were jokes, man.
Right? Nah, I mean,
come on, Ronnie D.
I know, right? But you know what, though? Here's the other part of that, right? That no one is talking about that either, right? Citizens United gave Disney the ability to be extra vocal like they have been and have impact.
Yes, it did.
People are not thinking about that one either. They're just thinking about, no, that's the other angle. This is why Citizens United is bad. Bad Citizens United. Bad. Sit in the corner, Citizens United. Bad. But that's what we have to turn around because if we turn that around, Disney's saying, "Oh, we're gonna go into wokeism." What huh? Who you, bruh? Okay,
right.
Okay, bruh. That's cool. You do that. You do the woke thing, eh? The woke thing. Yeah. Just make sure you take a pillow when you get very sleepy and crash. Make sure you go to sleep. Yeah?
Right. Exactly.
But now it's like if you're woke, like your words are like a shock through the political world. Oh no, we got to go protect Disney. No, you don't. No grown folks. That's a grown ass company.
That's a grown ass mouse. Mickey Mouse is decades old.
Right. He's like 1,000 years old. You know what I'm saying? He's like 1,000 years old. What you mean he needs defending? He's been fighting long enough.
Yeah, that dude can drive a boat. He has all this stuff. Like he'll be fine. He's got Darkwing Duck there to protect him. He's got the rescue rangers. If he gets in trouble, they'll rescue him. I mean, it's fine.
It's cool. It's legit.
So what do you think is going to go from here? Do you think they're going to keep doubling down on this woke stuff? Because I know you saw that leaked video with the not so secret agenda. Do you think that they're going to maybe pump the brakes on that because it got publicized, or do you think they're going to keep going full bore, or how do you think they're going to?
They're going to keep going full bore, right? And the project is going to start in Orlando, right? The project's going to start in Orlando, right? It's going to leak out, and it's going to end up in Orlando County Schools. Watch what I tell you, Polk County Schools, right? Which is Lakeland, that way, right? It will leak out. And then it's going to be a testing ground. And then they'll be like, okay, we can refine this. And we need to just slide this out there without nobody knowing what's happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Kind of like they did with CRT. You know, they just, CRT, big deal. Da. We can have CRT in schools. Okay, no, it's cool. We ain't going to have it in school. We're just going to switch it up. DEI, diversity, equity, because we're just going to switch the game up. and you're not even gonna know what it is. We're just gonna call it something else. And they're still
Yep.
paying attention to CRT. Those three letters are three letters you need to be paying attention to DEI because it's the same thing.
Yep.
That's what they do, right?
That's true. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to talk about that too at some other point. I mean, I wish I had more time, but because there's so much that we can talk about. But
oh yeah.
But I agree. I mean, they are just gonna switch it up. So I mean, that's how it's gonna happen.
What the hell about the progressive friends?
Exactly.
Friends, come on.
Yeah. So, but before we head out, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Y'all can find me if you just pull up your favorite podcast platform, type in Southern Liberty, you will find me right there. If you want to listen to me live, go to live.bpmg.us. On social medias, just type in Man of Justice 007. I don't care if it's Twitter, TikTok, the whole thing. Any social medias, Man of Justice 007. And you can also find my nonprofit website, bpmg.us, Black Patriot Media Group. You can find that there and check that out. So that's where I'll be at.
All right, bro. Well, thanks for coming on. We've got to do it again soon.
Oh, yes, we definitely will. We got to get you on Southern Liberty so we get these folks in South Florida to hear you, bro. You know what I'm saying?
That's
so
right.
We'll do that.
All right. That sounds good.